Hello and welcome to Arts Insights Live. My name is Nagam Weeby, President of Arts Consulting Group, and I'm glad we are here together today. For those of you joining Arts Insights Live for the first time, welcome. This is our bi-weekly series where we have candid, thoughtful conversations about the trends, data, and ideas shaping the arts and culture field. In these sessions, we explore different subjects from leadership transitions, executive search, capital campaigns, strategic planning, succession planning, etc. And we don't come here with all the answers. We come here to stay in dialogue with a field that we all care deeply about. So thanks again for joining us. And before we begin, if you're joining us live, I want to invite you to drop a comment. Let us know where you're tuning in from. We always appreciate seeing who's in the room with us. And for those of you who join us regularly, thank you. Your engagement and continued presence in these conversations mean a great deal to us. Also, other than putting in the comment where are you tuning in from, at any point during this conversation, feel free to share your thoughts, your questions in the comments. And even at the end, if there are specific subjects you want us to explore in future Arts Insights Live, please put it in the comment or DM Arts Consulting Group as well. All right, so today our topic is the expectations leaders carry, which is a loaded title. I mean, what's being asked of leaders today? What has changed? What has not? And what it takes to stay grounded, authentic, and resilient through it. I'm joined today by Howell Sims, a valued colleague and someone I've had the pleasure of working with. Howell is one of ACG's senior advisors and is also one of the amazing guest practitioners at the Ascend by ACG cohort program. Howell brings a thoughtful perspective on leadership shaped by years of working across the arts and cultural sector. He works across cultures and countries with teams ranging in size, from 5 people to 150 plus. And he has spent much of his career thinking about how institutions evolve and how leaders navigate complexity. His work focuses on leadership, people, and organizational culture, and he brings a very grounded perspective on what leadership looks like in practice. Howell, thank you for joining me today, and I'm glad we're having this conversation.
Thank you for asking me, Nagam.
All right, well, I'd like to start with your experience. While the context around leadership continues to change, many of the demands of the role remain consistent a little bit across generations and even art forms. So perhaps we can begin there. Can you share a moment from your leadership journey that reflects how expectations of arts and culture leaders have stayed consistent over time? And how does that show up today, especially when leading multi-generational teams?
Of course. And first, good morning to anybody who's in their morning. Good afternoon to my friends and colleagues in the United Kingdom and other places. A good evening to my friends and colleagues in Australia. And you really should be in bed because it's 2:00 in the morning. Watch this later if you would. And a couple of thoughts about setting the context for our conversation, if I may, Nagam, to start. Well, I contend that leading in arts and culture organizations and in the arts and culture sectors in general is a unique leadership experience. Leaders will always say that our experiences are unique wherever we are, I suppose. But there's something for somebody who leads, and that could be a board member, it could be a CEO, it could be anybody who sees themselves as a leader in the arts. Certainly, it could be true of artists, because they are the leaders, that in a sense we're being multilingual all the time. We're having to cope with talking corporate to the corporates and politics to the politicians, and maybe the arts to the artists, and somehow managing within all of those different conversations to retain some sense of our own purpose, our inner compass. And we'll talk more about that as we go through this discussion. But because one's surrounded by all these different voices, it to me strikes me, it's one of the things I most love about the work, is that we are constantly having to think about how to translate what our wish and our desire is. And I suppose the other things, of course, we have to mention, since it's on everybody's minds is what AI is doing, as much as we know, to the world around us. And the thing I particularly want to recognize in terms of technology is, of course, its invaluable assistance in many ways, but that it can never be human. We in arts and culture work in a very messy, unpredictable, occasionally manageable, sometimes measurable world, and it's the human world, and we're humans. AI can assist us with that, but we don't think yet, I may be careful in saying this, that AI can dream, and we work with making dreams reality all the time. And then finally, one experience you asked me about, well, at the start of the pandemic, the pandemic, I was running an organization called Musica Viva Australia. We had national tours of classical artists. We had 14 ensembles traveling constantly around schools in the country, seeing around 250,000 children. And overnight, everything stopped. The international borders closed, the state borders closed, and we were all suddenly here on the digital platform. And I remember one of my colleagues who ran another organization saying, well, surely all you need to do is just suspend everything until we're out of this, because the audiences will come back and schools will want you to return. And I'm using that experience because it was completely against everything that I and my colleagues around me thought was important, and that was the music we were providing, the education we were providing. So on the one hand, it would have saved us money to suspend operations, quite a lot of money actually, but it wouldn't have maintained our purpose and our mission and our impact, which is what we were there to provide. So I think that one comes up for me as the clash between practicality, objectivity, perhaps, and purpose.
Thank you. I mean, it's a lot, like, just remembering the mission. It's hard sometimes, especially with the pressures from different people, but from circumstances in the outer world. Another thing, when you spoke about AI, actually there was an article, I don't know, this week maybe in New York Times, and New York Times, and it said the meeting that you hate may keep AI from stealing your job. It's an interesting article, but it talks a little bit about, like, AI can duplicate some stuff, but there are some stuff that needs the human element, like that. No matter at this point, no matter where AI is, it can't duplicate that, and those are some skills for the leader.
Yeah, I think of it, I use it as a reference point, as a testing platform for ideas. But I know that what the services I use anyway can't yet provide for me is an understanding of human relationship, not least also an understanding of us and what our inner purpose actually drives us to do.
Yeah. Even Laura said, Laura Zucker, who's the co-facilitator of Ascend in our last Arts Insights Live, there's the experience that AI can't really duplicate, like those things that you only know by experiencing. It's not intellectual, it's on an experiential level.
Yeah. Absolutely.
All right.
What are you seeing in all of this with the clients that ACG works with? Anything else that comes to mind that is front of mind for you?
Well, at ACG, we operate across many different contexts, and because we do like executive search, interim management, we do strategic planning and succession planning and revenue enhancement or fundraising. And I think it's leadership readiness. I think we're seeing, and again, this is based on anecdotal, like we didn't do a study for that, but just by being in the rooms with different clients and different leaders, even different candidates. And that's my observation, is a leadership readiness gap that's widening a little bit. I mean, organizations are moving through transitions faster. I mean, I don't know how many times I can tell you people call and they're like, we want to do the search and fill it in 1 month. And while we understand the urgency, there is some thoughtfulness that have to go during the transition that needs time. So that pressure for fast, sometimes because of external pressure too, or sometimes by choice. But my observations are that the leaders stepping into those roles are being asked to demonstrate impact on a timeline that doesn't always match the complexity they've inherited. We're also seeing sometimes boards carrying elevated expectations that aren't clearly articulated, which means leaders are often navigating uncertainty about what success actually looks like, in addition to the uncertainty of the world that we're all going through right now. And did you want to say something?
No.
We actually asked people on LinkedIn before, as just to see what people would say. We put on LinkedIn a question about what nobody prepared you for in arts leadership. And then we had about 77 people answer. Now, I don't know who those 77, again, this is with a grain of salt, but this is just a poll on LinkedIn. But we had different options. We had managing teams through change, staying true under pressure, navigating uncertainty, and financial sustainability. And financial sustainability and navigating uncertainty were the top picked options. There were other comments that people added in addition to those choices that included, and that validates what I just told you, like unspoken structural issues and expectations, board realities, like working with boards and the complexity of that and what is needed to be prepared to do that. And then the last two were the isolation, dealing with isolation in leadership, how to deal with that, and the sometimes walking into unhealthy workplace environments. And then you don't expect that because that doesn't maybe show up in the interview process or shows up in small doses, and you think, oh, I've done this, I can do this, but then you walk in and you're like, oh, this is another level. And then somebody else actually put a comment that those are all basic leadership skills, and we shouldn't be surprised with those expectations. I mean, yeah, I agree, those are basic leadership still the skills, but I think the dose and the level that you have to deal with is sometimes not what is expected. What are your thoughts about how the people responded on those, and what would you choose?
Oh, well, I choose the challenge of maintaining one's own purpose, one's own direction, because I think what I would argue again that what makes it different for us in what we call different things, nonprofit, third sector, a charity sector, depending on where we are, but it's the sector that isn't the sector that's corporate, that's driven by shareholder value and by ensuring that your profits go up by 3% compound interest every year, or the kind of classic capitalist measurements. That's not alone what we're working with. So I would go for authenticity in a compass, because for us, particularly around the board table, not always, but often we're working with people who come from that profit-driven perspective, and the unwise ones, and thankfully I'm sure there are not too many of them around, but the unwise ones will think that experience prepares them to bring value to the board table. It doesn't always. My favorite story, I've worked with lots of people in the finance and the fintech industries in several different countries. And my favorite story quickly is that of the chair of a board of an organization that shall remain nameless, although if anybody's watching, they'll know what it is. He was renowned in the country that I was working in as an extraordinary banker, created banks very successfully. And at a board meeting, when a particular issue came to the table, he actually did say, well, if this were a bank, I'd know what to do immediately, but it's not, so I don't. So what do you all working in day by day in the arts think we should be considering? And I think that's an example of again, self-awareness, both on the part of the staff leadership, the artistic leadership, but also the governance leadership. So that's what comes up for me.
Mm-hmm. Self-awareness. I mean, and I saw you, we talked about it earlier, but I saw you post also an article yesterday about awareness and the importance of that. What does it require for a leader in practice? Having self-aware, like how do you increase your self-awareness?
Oh, oh, oh! When I find out, I'll let you know. I've been
Are there
trying
any
that
tips?
a few years. Well, firstly, and I guess not particularly jokingly, I would say it's a work in progress.
Right.
It doesn't
You never
ever
arrive.
stop. No, I think it is also a process that's informed as much by what we perceive to be our successes as leaders, or are perceived as successes by other people, as by our failures. I mean, I certainly know that where I have ignored my inner compass, as knowing that this wasn't a good place to be, I stayed too long. And that wasn't a good experience for me or for the organization. So I hope I learned from that to, amongst other things, test out whether my particular approach, my skills, my authenticity was in the right place. For those of us who strive for at least some modicum of self-knowledge, part of our responsibility is to know that we're, as far as we can tell, as you pointed out earlier from the recruitment process, no matter how fabulously designed, as of course yours are, there are always going to be surprises. And sometimes we need to listen to what the surprises are telling us in terms of our own place in that organization, or where it sits in our journey as leaders, because it really, I don't believe it should ever end. I hope I always remain curious about the work that I do.
If we go back to surprises or expectation, what do you think about the expectations leaders carry today? I mean, what feels most visible for you right now?
There is a sense, and I think that, again, I don't want to go on too much about the folks who sit around the board table, although they're pretty important people. If you look at the pressures that the for-profit sectors are under, and the expectations in those sectors, in every sector, in academia as well, for an increase, a pickup in pace. You mentioned it earlier, this idea that urgency, which isn't new, is somehow increasing. That and in some of the art forms we work in, the rise in what seems to be internationally an interest in populism is also increasing the pressure on particularly the classical art forms, but not just, on all artists. There is always that pressure to somehow prove that you're worth the investment, or worth attention, or worth the time, when what you're doing is invaluable. You still have to prove it. So I think the fact that pace is increasing, and that folks bring that into the organization, together with all the various wonderful tools that colleagues in marketing and colleagues in audience engagement and the artistic development, all those tools that are influenced by corporate structures, can be very useful, but again, they're coming into a different country, and we need to constantly be aware that it's not that we move more slowly. I don't think. In fact, some of my artist friends, some of the fastest moving people I know, but it is we work. We are deliberate in what we do, and we work at a pace that is sometimes different from the pace of the outside world.
And it's like the question I think about. I mean, I don't know if we have the answer for that, but how to navigate that, because especially it's not only the pressures internally, but the outside world and competition and all
well,
that.
Especially when the folks you report to are some of the people bringing those pressures, and part of the job in leadership of any kind in the arts is to, well, this is true of any sector, actually. I sit on the board of a healthcare clinic, for example, and I have to know as much as I can about the environment that organization works in. Same for folks working around the table in arts and culture organizations. Same for government departments creating cultural strategy. There's a lot of learning to do about what precisely are the pressures, what are the levers you can pull, because they're different from levers that levers are different in different places. What are the ones that relate to this particular art form that you're working in?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. For those who just joined us, we are talking about the expectations that leaders carry, especially with arts in arts and culture organizations. But we'd be interested to hear from you as well. I mean, what is something in your role, if you are a leader right now, or if you go back when you first started, what were you not fully prepared for? If you can write in the comments. And also, if you have any questions as we have this conversation, feel free to put it in the comments and be part of the conversation. What do you think, I mean, we talked about expectations, we talked about the why, like the internal pressures, the outside pressures. Are there anything else that is behind why are those expectations becoming more complex or layered? Or were they always complex and layered? Like, if we're saying right now there's additional complexity, is there additional complexity, and where is that coming
from? Well, I think they, to some degree, if we are called to leadership, then accommodating everything we've just said about self-awareness and checking why why you think you should be doing this and for whom you're doing it. I think the mix of influences, people, issues has changed. I mean, you could reflect that, 15 years ago, I don't know, less than that, the pressures that social media bring to the life of every leader did not exist. It's interesting, there was a piece, again, I think in the New York Times this week or last, about how corporations are increasingly buying up their own YouTube channels, for example, so that the CEO and or the leaders, whoever they are, have a direct way of communicating, and they're expected to be able to do that as part of their preparation to be a leader. And the same certainly is true increasingly in the work that we all get involved in arts and culture. So I think it's always been complex. I think that's why it's always been fascinating and complicated. But maybe the pots, the issues that we deal with have changed over time. As you might say, that of leading multi-generational teams, for example, well, that's always been an issue. But certainly since we became more, since the language of demography and marketing segmentation began to be used more generally, Gen Z, different generations, or the way that we now talk about the populations around us, then but we've always had that mix. But in fact, we now know more about how different generations are responding to work, to life, to what their expectations are, and we need to be accommodating of that, of course.
Or responsive, yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think is staying consistent across the leaders you work with? Like, what remained constant that leaders have to tap into, regardless of everything that's changing, regardless of the expectations?
I'm thinking of my geography teacher, Mrs. Edwards, when I was about, I don't know, 13 or something. And she was, she emanated peace in the middle of this crazy classroom of 13-year-olds throwing themselves off the walls and who didn't care very much about geography, I don't think, unless they were to become geographers. And the fact that she was as still as she was in the middle of all of that chaos and spoke very quietly so that you had to stop running around to listen to her was for me a lesson that I've remembered because she was one of the first people I knew who seemed to have a center. So I don't think, and that may just be my own psychology, of course it is, all my biases and generalizations are on display here, but I think the need, I mean, we don't automatically have, we're not automatically trusted as leaders. How would we dare presume that? We have to earn the trust. And one of the things that we as humans respond to in other humans is a sense of authenticity, to use what is probably now a very overused word. But I think in terms of effective leadership, I think that stayed the same. The way you express that has changed because technology has changed. So now, as we were just mentioning, leaders are expected to appear authentic on screen, in person, in writing, in a number of different cross communication channels. But I think we as human, to go back to the human technology piece again, I think we can tell as humans when somebody's being authentic, and we trust that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that resonates a lot. I mean, there's a version of authenticity also gets confused with saying whatever comes to mind, and they're not the same. But it's more like staying. I mean, I'm experiencing it as well. Is like staying connected to your values, especially when the pressure is real. Also, how to not internalize someone's else's definition of what a leader is, whether that comes from the corporate world or from the board or from the field or different people. Like there are different definition. Maybe 10 years ago, there was one way of what a leader looks like or should talk or be. And it's like, who created this definition? And do we have to internalize someone else's definition of what a leader in their role should look and sound like, and then lose track of their own? So yeah, like those are two different things that come to mind as you talk about authenticity, because it is like a buzzword, but what does it mean in practice? And those are two things that come to mind. How do you, so we talked about self-awareness, we talked about authenticity, we talked about the expectations and everything that is now facing a leader the minute they start. Are there any, like, how does a leader deal with that? The expectations that they knew, but then the new expectations, like, so you said there are some times you have to check in with yourself and know if you need to leave and stay. But if you're deciding to stay, like how are there any, from your experience or working with leaders or even your own journey, what are some thoughts that come to mind when you think about that?
It's certainly an area that we'll be exploring in the Ascend program that you've mentioned already. You'll say something more about. But I think from my own experience, because I've both failed to do this again and sometimes succeeded, is that it's the need to have support, both from the executive coaching perspective. I've nearly always had one, and miss not having one now, actually, at the moment, but also support outside the organization, because we can sometimes believe our own PR and believe that the organization is everything, when in fact it's just one part of our world, our life, even if we are absorbed in the role of leader. So having friends, travel, family, however you construct that, is, I think, an important. I'm not sure I agree with the concept of balance, but that's one way of supporting yourself, certainly.
Yeah. Awesome. And yeah, talking about, I mean, that's why Ascend was created. It was in my first 3 months, I did a lot of listening sessions with candidates, with clients, with organizations, and we're doing more as well. We're continuing to do that, but Ascend was created because there's how do we prepare? How do we increase our readiness? And how can we talk about this candidly with each other, but also with guest practitioners, yourself included, that are gonna share their experiences as well and their insights in a way. And with that, I'll remind everybody that Ascend's application is April 20 is the deadline. So there's a few more days. Make sure to apply to that. And then the last thing, any last thoughts about this topic today before we wrap?
It's a never-ending discussion and one that I love being part of. Thanks for asking me to be here.
Yeah, of course. No, thanks for being here. I wanted to let everybody know as well that we are research collaborators with Courtney Ford, who is doing a national research about the leader's readiness, especially in today's environment. So make sure you sign up to our email list, because we're going to be publishing a survey soon as the next phase of her research. She's been talking with a lot of board members, funders, leaders as first phase, and now we're going to have a survey. So sign up to our email list to get the survey, but also to get the results of that study. And hopefully Courtney will be with us on one of the Arts Insights to talk about that. And it's more about the results of that study and how does that relate to leaders today and how they get ready. And I think Emil Kang, who's a guest practitioner in Ascend as well, is a research advisor on that research as well. So shout out to Emil and to Courtney. And I just wanted to say that for people who want to hear more about, because we talked about anecdotal stuff, but like this is a research that will have also more data. Howell, thank you for your honesty and your perspective today. Thank you to everyone who joined us and shared your reflection with us. We'll continue to explore many of those themes through Arts Insights Live and Ascend. Thanks for watching Arts Insight Live, and until next time, have a great day and week.